Hello, my name is Joshua Keith, and this is theburningcoal.com, a website dedicated to God's glory, His grace, and our response to it. Today, I'd like us to do a Monday motivation on the idea of being free. And really, what we're talking about is what Jesus says in John chapter 8, verses 31 through 32. It says, "So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, 'If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.'" This is a passage that is actually quoted quite a bit. And sometimes I'm not even sure people realize they're quoting from the Bible or attributing to the Bible. But it has become something that people use as a bit of a catchphrase. And one of the things that can happen is that we lose the depth of the meaning of what Jesus says here. Because when Jesus says the truth will set you free, he actually has a deep understanding of what God expects from us. It's not just as simple as understanding truth or knowing the truth about something, although that's the starting point. But notice how he phrases it. He talks about, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples." And if you keep in mind the bigger context, he's talking to these Jews who had believed him, but the Jews who believed him, as we go through the next few verses, start arguing with him. And they actually do not become his disciples. They refuse to abide in his word. And so when we look at the idea of the truth will set you free, we need to understand that God is asking something that is actually really hard for us to do in order to be set free. So, what are some of the things that we can take away from this? Well, first of all, we need to acknowledge our need of being free. In fact, one of the things that these people, even though they believed in him, one of the things that they did not acknowledge was that they needed to be freed from slavery. They argue about how have we ever been in sin, and Jesus tells them that anyone who sins becomes a slave to sin. Other times, Jesus has to tell the Pharisees and the religious leaders that the doctor comes to those who are sick. Those who are well have no need of a doctor. And the fact is that everybody needed Jesus as the great physician. But not everybody would acknowledge that they needed Jesus as the great physician. And so when we come to the idea of the truth will set you free, the first thing that we need to understand is that we are in slavery, that we need God's help, that we need to be set free. We have made a mess of things, and we cannot get out of it without God's help. That is the first truth that is a part of setting you free. And if we just think that we can come to God and we can just get a little bit of help, a lot of times we think that we just need a little bit of tweaking, not really a complete overhaul. We're not really slaves. We're people that are just a little flawed and need a little bit of help. That's not what Jesus is talking about here. He wants us to understand that we are slaves to sin. We are in a pit that we cannot get out of. We owe a debt that we cannot repay. And so we need to acknowledge that need. And then as we're looking at the truth, we need to understand that the truth is what comes from God's word. Again, remember what he said in verse 31, "Abide in my word if you want to truly be my disciples." And so when we're talking about this idea of truth, we're not just saying, well, okay, 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's the truth. That's going to set me free. It's not just any truth that we're talking about. We're talking about the truth about who we are, why we were created, what happened to us because we refuse to acknowledge the Creator, how we got into this slavery of sin. All of those things are found in God's word. And God gives us the truth about what he expects of us. He gives us the truth about who we are, what we can be, what we should be. But if we refuse to acknowledge his word as the truth, then it's never going to set us free. It's never going to let us be what we were created to be. And so we need to be willing to go to God's word for that truth and abide in it. And that's really the most important thing is that God's truth requires actions. Notice the context again of what Jesus says here on you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. He's talking about those who abide in God's word. What does that mean? It's people that are doing God's word. It's those who are truly disciples, those who have dedicated their lives to Jesus, to his teachings, and the way he expects them to live. And so when we look at this idea of the truth will set us free, it's not just that there's a truth, that there's a knowledge of it, but instead it's that there is the truth, that we are sinners, that we need God's word, that we need to obey what he says. And if we're willing to do that, then yes, we will be set free. So this week, let's focus on being those that are truly Jesus' disciples. I hope this lesson blesses you in your walk in his kingdom.